The hospital halls echoed with hurried footsteps, muffled voices, and the persistent beeping of monitors. Emma Wilson, her shoulders weighed down by exhaustion, pushed through yet another grueling shift. Her life had become a cycle of long hours, financial strain, and an aching loneliness that she had learned to ignore. But that night, as rain battered the windows and lightning split the sky, something, or rather, someone, would disrupt her routine in ways she could never have imagined.
Hello, I'm the storyteller of the channel, and I would like to ask for a second of your time to subscribe, activate the notification bell, and like the video so that YouTube can take our story to more people who are passionate about stories like this. Thank you, and without further ado, let's continue with our story.
In the dim light of the emergency room, a figure appeared, soaked to the bone, his ragged clothes clinging to his frail frame. Another lost soul, another case to be handled and forgotten. Or so everyone thought. Her colleagues barely spared him a glance, already making their assumptions. Another one trying to escape the storm, someone muttered. He'll be gone by morning. But Emma's gaze lingered on the man longer than she intended. Something about him didn't fit the usual profile of a street wanderer. His hands, too smooth, too unblemished. His posture, though weak, carried an unfamiliar elegance. But logic told her that none of this mattered right now. What mattered was that he was here, clutching his chest in pain, and she was a nurse. And that meant only one thing. She would help him, regardless of what others thought. She led him to an examination room, offering quiet reassurances as she gathered her equipment. Let's see what's going on, okay? Her voice was gentle, practiced, but behind it was an unshakable resolve. As she checked his vitals, her mind briefly drifted to her own struggles. Bills piling up, her mother's declining health, the relentless weight of responsibility. Yet, even with her own burdens threatening to crush her, she refused to see this man as anything less than human. Compassion wasn't a privilege she gave only when convenient. It was the very essence of who she was. His silence spoke volumes, his gaze darting between her hands and the door, as if unsure whether to stay or flee. "What's your name?" she asked, but he only hesitated, offering nothing more than a faint smile. He was hiding something, she could feel it. But Emma had learned long ago that some wounds weren't visible, and some stories weren't told in words. Instead of demanding answers, she did what she did best. She cared. She wrapped him in a hospital blanket, shielding him not just from the cold, but from the judgment outside these walls. A soft sigh escaped his lips as the warmth of the blanket settled around him. For a brief moment, the tension in his shoulders eased, as if he had found, however briefly, a place of safety. Emma studied his face, the sharp lines softened by exhaustion. There was something in his expression, gratitude perhaps, or maybe surprise, as if kindness was something he had long forgotten. It was a fleeting moment, but one that planted a question in her mind. Who exactly was this man? Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the world had shrunk to just the two of them. Emma knew she was running on fumes, knew she should be thinking about her own well-being. But looking at the man in front of her, she couldn't shake the feeling that fate had placed him in her path for a reason. What that reason was, she didn't know yet, but something told her she was about to find out. Exhaustion clawed at Emma's bones, every muscle in her body screaming for rest. 16 hours on her feet, juggling patients, paperwork, and the endless chaos of the ER. It was enough to drain even the most seasoned nurse. But despite the fatigue weighing her down, her eyes drifted back to the mysterious man she had taken in. He sat on a hospital bed, shoulders hunched, hands gripping the blanket as if it were the only thing tethering him to reality. The room buzzed with quiet judgment from her colleagues, their skeptical glances cutting through the sterile air. Why waste time on someone who might just be looking for a warm place to stay? But Emma had never been one to turn her back on those in need. She knew what they were thinking. He's probably just another drifter, taking advantage of the system. But Emma didn't care. Compassion wasn't about deciding who was worthy. It was about showing up, even when no one else would. The man's breathing had steadied, but his face remained pale, his hands trembling slightly. Hunger, she realized. How long had it been since he'd eaten a proper meal? Without hesitation, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her last few crumpled bills. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get him something from the vending machine. She barely had enough for herself, but in that moment, she didn't think twice. The soft clink of coins dropping into the machine echoed in the quiet corridor. A simple snack, a small bag of crackers, a bottle of water. Hardly a feast, but enough to keep him going. When she handed him the food, he hesitated, looking up at her with an unreadable expression. Was it gratitude? Shock? A mix of both? Slowly, he reached for the bottle, his fingers brushing against hers for the briefest second before he pulled away. He wasn't used to kindness. That much was clear. But Emma wasn't doing this for thanks. She was doing it because it was the right thing to do. You don't have to, he murmured, his voice raspy, as if unused to speaking. Emma simply shrugged, offering a small smile. Everyone deserved a little kindness. The words hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. He nodded slowly, taking a cautious sip of water, as if still unsure whether to trust the moment. Emma had seen that look before, the look of someone who had spent too long expecting disappointment. As the storm outside continued to rage, the weight of Emma's own struggles pressed against her chest. Her mother's medical bills were overdue, her rent barely covered, and her savings dwindling faster than she cared to admit. And yet, standing here, watching this man take slow, measured bites of the cracker she had bought for him, none of that mattered. It wasn't about what she had. It was about what she could give. A sharp knock on the door interrupted the quiet moment. A fellow nurse peeked in, eyebrows raised. Emma, are you seriously spending your money on him? The judgment was thick in her tone, but Emma didn't flinch. I'm just doing my job, she replied simply. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. This wasn't just about nursing. This was about humanity. And something told her that this night, this man, would change everything. The morning shift arrived with the first rays of sunlight piercing through the hospital blinds. Emma stretched her sore muscles, exhaustion settling deep in her bones after another relentless night. She turned toward the bed where the mysterious patient had been resting, only to find it empty. The sheets were slightly crumpled, the blanket neatly folded at the foot of the bed. No sign of the man she had cared for, no discharge papers, no explanation. Just gone. A strange pang hit her chest. Had he been just another drifter, slipping away into the city's endless stream of forgotten souls? Her colleagues wasted no time confirming their suspicions. Told you he was just here for a warm bed. One of them scoffed, shaking her head. Emma ignored the comment, her mind racing with questions. It wasn't just the way he had disappeared. It was the way he had carried himself, the subtle contradictions in his appearance. The soft hands, the quiet dignity, the look in his eyes that spoke of something deeper. Who was he, really? She sighed, pushing the thoughts away. There was work to do, and she couldn't afford to dwell on what-ifs. Days passed, and the memory of the man slowly faded into the background noise of Emma's demanding life. But then, just as she had convinced herself to forget, something unexpected happened. A crisp, white envelope sat atop her locker, its surface unmarked except for her name. Frowning, she picked it up, her fingers tracing its smooth edges. No return address, no clue who had left it. With a racing heart, she tore it open, revealing a cashier's check inside. The number stared back at her, $50,000. Her breath hitched, her mind scrambling to make sense of it. This had to be a mistake, a joke. But as she pulled out the small note tucked inside, her hands trembled. The message was simple, handwritten in an elegant script, for your mother's care. Thank you for your kindness. A friend. Emma's vision blurred with unshed tears. The mysterious man. It had to be him. The very same person everyone dismissed. The same man she had spent her last dollars on. He hadn't just disappeared. He had left behind something that would change her life. She clutched the check, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, disbelief, gratitude, confusion. This money meant everything. It meant her mother could receive the treatment she so desperately needed. It meant Emma could breathe again, even if just for a little while. But one question gnawed at her. Why? Why her? Why had he chosen to help, after all the kindness had already gone one way? And most importantly, who was he? The air around her felt heavy with possibility. She had saved countless patients before, treated strangers with the same dedication and compassion. But never had she imagined something like this. Somewhere out there, the man she had fed, the man she had wrapped in a hospital blanket, had been watching, had been waiting, and now he had given her a gift that would change everything. The envelope had changed everything, but the question still lingered. Emma carried the check with her like a secret, her mind racing with possibilities. Who was this mysterious benefactor? And why had he chosen to help her in such a profound way? Days later, as she walked into the hospital for another shift, a neatly folded invitation sat atop her desk. The gold lettering shimmered under the fluorescent light. St. Mary's Annual Charity Gala. Emma frowned. This event was for the city's elite, not overworked nurses barely scraping by. So why was her name on the guest list? She almost didn't go, almost convinced herself that it was a mistake, that she had no place in a room full of millionaires and philanthropists. But something deep inside her whispered that this wasn't a coincidence. Dressed in a simple but elegant dress borrowed from a friend, she stepped into the grand ballroom, chandeliers casting golden reflections on the polished marble floors. Laughter and music filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile, chaotic environment of the ER. And then, the moment came, the moment that made her breath catch in her throat. The evening's host took the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice commanding attention. "Tonight, we recognize an extraordinary individual whose generosity has changed lives." Emma's fingers curled around the stem of her glass as the crowd erupted into applause. And then, from the shadows of the room, a man stepped forward. Tall, composed, dressed in immaculate black tuxedo. Her heart stopped. It was him, the same man she had found drenched and shivering in the ER. But now, he was unrecognizable. Mr. Alexander Carter, the host continued, has been a pillar of philanthropy, dedicating his fortune to helping those in need. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. Alexander Carter. The name echoed her mind, a name she had heard before, but never connected to the stranger she had cared for. The man she had fed with her last few dollars. The man she had thought was homeless. And yet, here he was, standing before an audience of the city's most powerful, his presence commanding the room. The moment their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. A silent acknowledgement, a secret only they shared. The room faded into the background as he spoke. "A few nights ago," Alexander began, his voice calm but firm, "I found myself in a place I never expected to be. Stripped of wealth, stripped of status. I was left with only one thing, the hope that kindness still existed." His gaze locked onto hers. "And that night I found it." Emma's breath caught as murmurs spread through the crowd. They didn't know. They had no idea he was talking about her. But she knew. Her mind reeled as the pieces fell into place. He had tested the world, tested humanity, and in that moment of desperation, she had unknowingly restored his faith. And yet, even as the room erupted into applause, Emma felt the weight of something greater looming in the air. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The ballroom was still buzzing with whispers, the weight of Alexander's words hanging in the air like an unspoken truth. Emma felt the intensity of every gaze in the room, but none of them mattered, not when his eyes were locked onto hers. She barely noticed as he stepped down from the stage, his movements slow, deliberate. The world around her faded, the noise dimming, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The man she had once wrapped in a hospital blanket now stood before her, no longer a mystery, but a revelation. Emma Wilson. Alexander's voice cut through the thick silence, filled with something raw and undeniable. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask for anything. And yet, you showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return." His words sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something life-altering. She opened her mouth to speak, to tell him that she had only done what any decent person should. But before she could form a single word, he did something that made the entire room gasp. In one fluid motion, Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's heart stopped. The air seemed to vanish from her lungs as he sank to one knee, his expression unreadable, somewhere between determination and vulnerability. A collective hush fell over the crowd, the weight of the moment pressing down on every soul in the room. She had spent years making life-or-death decisions in the ER, but nothing had ever made her feel as unsteady as this. "You changed my life, Emma," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the emotion thickening it. "And I don't just mean that night. You reminded me that kindness, real kindness, still exists in this world. You gave me hope when I'd lost it. And now, I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that your kindness was never misplaced." He opened the box, revealing a ring that sparkled under the dazzling ballroom lights. The world around them stood still. Emma's mind raced, her heart slamming against her ribcage. This was too much, too fast. They had met under the strangest of circumstances, their lives colliding in ways neither of them had planned. Could love really take root in a moment like this? Could something so unexpected, so surreal, truly be real? She searched his face, looking for hesitation, for doubt, but all she found was certainty. Unwavering, undeniable certainty. Gasps and whispers filled the air, waiting, anticipating. Emma's lips parted, but no words came. She had spent her life making sacrifices, putting others before herself. And now, here was a man offering her everything. Not just wealth, but devotion, respect, partnership. Was she ready to take that leap? Was she ready to let someone else care for her the way she had always cared for others? The weight of the moment pressed down on her, the room closing in. And then, just when it felt like the pressure might consume her, something inside her shifted. Because sometimes, life doesn't give you time to overthink. Sometimes, it just hands you a moment and dares you to take it. Emma had spent years believing that love was something that happened to other people. Something distant, almost unreal, like a dream she was never meant to touch. But standing there, with Alexander's unwavering gaze locked onto hers, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about romance. This was about purpose, about finding someone who saw the world the way she did. The hesitation in her chest slowly unraveled as she realized the truth. She had spent her life giving to others, never expecting anything in return. And yet, here was a man who wanted to give to her. As the days turned into weeks, Emma and Alexander spent more time together, unraveling the layers of their unexpected connection. What started as gratitude soon blossomed into something deeper, something neither of them had expected. They talked about their pasts, their struggles, their dreams. And in those quiet moments, Emma realized that beneath Alexander's wealth, beneath the luxury and power, he was just like her, someone who had been searching for meaning, for something real. And now, they had found it in each other. But love alone wasn't enough. They both knew that. Their meeting had been more than chance. It had been a call to action. One night, as they sat in Alexander's study, surrounded by documents and plans, he looked at her with that same certainty she had seen in his eyes the night of the gala. "What if we could do more?" he asked. "What if we could make sure no one else ever has to choose between kindness and survival?" The idea took root in Emma's heart before she even realized it. They wouldn't just build a life together. They would build a legacy. Together, they launched the Wilson Carter Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free medical care for those who couldn't afford it. Hospitals, clinics, emergency aid, every aspect of the project was designed with one goal in mind: ensuring that no one was turned away simply because they lacked money. Emma poured her heart into the initiative, her years of experience in the ER shaping policies, training medical staff, and overseeing operations. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just treating symptoms, she was changing lives. As the foundation grew, so did their bond. The long nights spent drafting proposals, the moments of exhaustion and triumph, the shared mission that burned bright between them. It all solidified something Emma hadn't even realized was forming. Love. Real, undeniable, unstoppable love. Not the kind wrapped in fairy tales, but the kind built on respect, partnership, and a shared desire to leave the world better than they found it. And when Alexander asked her again, this time in the quiet of their home, away from the flashing lights and the expectant crowd, Emma finally had her answer. Their wedding wasn't a spectacle. No extravagant ballrooms, no glittering guest lists filled with socialites. Instead, they chose something intimate, something that reflected who they truly were. A small gathering, close friends, and a quiet promise of forever. As Emma stood before the man who had once been a stranger in the ER, she realized something profound. It was never about the money, never about the grand gestures. It was about the moment she chose to believe in someone when no one else did. And as they exchanged vows, as their journey together truly began, Emma knew that this was just the start. Because when two people share the same purpose, when love is fueled by something greater than just passion, the impact they leave behind becomes unstoppable. A vida temem jaido de no surpreender cuando menos esperamos. Emma pensó que estaba apenas ajudando homem necessitado. Mas no final, foi generaliza que muda tudo. Quantas vezes ignoramos as pessoas, presumindo que conhecemos suas histórias? Quantas oportunidades de conexão e generosidade deixamos escapar porque julgamos muito rápido? Este não foi apenas uma história emocional. Foi uma história real. Uma história tocante que nos lembra do poder de compexo. Agora, eu quero ouvir de você. Você já fez algo Johnny para o estranho? Sem saber o impacto que isso teria? Ou você já esteve em uma situação que a gentileza de alguém mudou sua vida? Compartilhe seus pensamentos nos comentários. Eu leo cada deles. Sua história pode inspire outra pessoa a escolher a gentileza hoje. E se você ama histórias que tocam o coração e desafiam a maneira como vimos o mundo, certifique-se de se inscrever no canal e ativar as notificações. Dessa forma, você não perderá a próxima história poderosa e real que fará você pensar duas vezes sobre o mundo. Se you redder.